a story time, we're reading Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. This is the modern English. No, I do not own the rights to it, but if you look on our page, I have set a link to buy this one. I think it's $15. Well worth it. So where did we leave Christian and Hopeful last? Oh, they had escaped Mr. Buy-ins and his double standards of things. All right, let's find out what's going to happen next, because hopefully we can cover a lot of ground. So, Christian and Hopeful walked ahead of them again and went on until they came to a settled plain called Ease, which they journeyed across with much satisfaction. However, the plain was so narrow they quickly crossed it and reached the other side. Now, at the farther side of the plain was a little hill called Lucre, and within that hill was a silver mine. Some pilgrims who had formerly gone that way had turned aside to see the mine because of its rarity. However, for some who ventured too near the brim of the pit, the deceitful ground beneath their feet broke under them. Some were slain and some had been maimed there. Those who were injured were never free of the influence of the mine's wounds until their dying days. Then I saw in my dream that a little off the road, right next to the silver mine, stood a man by the name of Demas. This gentleman called to passing pilgrims to come and see. In this manner, he called to Christian and his companion, Hopeful. "Hello, friends. Turn in here and I will show you something remarkable." Christian called back to him, "What could be so deserving of our attention as to cause us to turn from the way to see it?" Demas motioned toward the pit. "Here is a silver mine. At this very moment, some are digging in it for treasure. If you will come with a little effort, you may be able to richly provide for yourselves." Hopeful looked at Christian with wide eyes. "Let's go see." Christian shook his head. "Not me," he said. "I have heard of this place and about the many who have been slain here. Besides, that treasure is a snare to those who seek it, for it hinders them in their pilgrimage." Then Christian called to Demas and said, "Is this not a dangerous place? Has it not hindered many in their pilgrimage? But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare and many foolish and harmful desires which plunge men into ruin and destruction." 1 Timothy 6:9. "It's not very dangerous," Demas said, "except to those who are careless." But his face blushed as he spoke the words. Then Christian addressed Hopeful confidently. "Let's not take one step off the way to wander from this path, but instead let us stay true to our way." Hopeful looked over his shoulder behind him. "I guarantee you, when Buy-ins comes to this place, if he is offered the same invitation, he will turn in here to get a closer look." "I don't doubt it." Christian took a deep breath and let out a sigh. "There's no doubt of it, for his principles lead him that way, and I wager 100 to 1 that he dies there." Demas persisted and called to the two pilgrims again. "Won't you even come over just to look?" Christian answered bluntly, "Demas, you are an enemy to those who pursue the right ways of the Lord of this way. I know you already have been rebuked yourself for turning aside here by one of his majesty's judges. For Demas, having loved this present world, has deserted me." 2 Timothy 4:10. "So why do you seek to bring us into the same condemnation? Besides, if we were to turn aside here, our Lord the King would certainly hear about it and reveal our shame. Our desire is to stand with boldness before him." Demas cried out to them again, claiming he belonged to their brotherhood. Then he said, "If you'll wait for just a short time, I'll join you on the pilgrimage." No, he won't. In response, Christian said, "What is your name? Isn't it the same name by which I've already called you?" "Yes, my name is Demas, and I am the son of Abraham." "I know you," Christian answered. "Gehazi was your great grandfather and Judas your father, and you have continued to walk in their ways. What you are suggesting is nothing more than one of your devilish pranks. Your father was a traitor and hanged himself, and you deserve no better reward." Wow. Then, when Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that he had been condemned, he felt remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." But they said, what is that to us? See to it yourself." And he threw the pieces of silver into the temple sanctuary and departed, and he went away and hanged himself. Matthew 27, 3 through 5. "Be assured that when we have an audience with the king, we will tell him of your behavior." So Christian and Hopeful continued on their way, but by this time By-ins and his companions had come within sight again. Oh boy. Christian and Hopeful watched as the trailing party arrived at the silver mine. As soon as Demas called to them, they left the way and went over to him to look. Now, whether they fell into the pit by looking over the brink, or they went down to dig, or whether they were smothered at the bottom by the poisonous fumes that often arise in those depths, I don't know. While I am not certain of the specifics, I did notice that they were never seen again in the way. Then sang Christian this song: "By-ins and the silver Demas both agree. One calls, the other runs, that he may be a sharer in his lucre. So these two take up in this world and go and no farther go." Now, in my dream, I saw that just on the other side of this plain, the Pilgrims came to a place where an old monument stood right beside the highway. At the sight of it, they were both concerned because of the strangeness of its shape, for it seemed to them as if it had been a woman transformed into the shape of a pillar. The two of them stood intently looking at it, but for a time they didn't know what to think of it. After some time, Hopeful spotted an inscription on the head of the monument, but it was written in an unusual style of writing. So, being no scholar, he called to Christian to see if he could understand the meaning. Christian examined it, and after a little studying of the letters, he found them to mean "Remember Lot's wife." So he read it to his traveling companion, and together they concluded that it was the pillar of salt into which Lot's wife had been turned because she looked back with a covetous heart when she was fleeing from Sodom for safety. But his wife, from behind him, looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Genesis 19:26. This amazing sight stimulated the following discussion. "Ah, my brother, this is a timely sight," Christian started, "for it came to us at just the right time, as it follows the invitation which Demas offered us to come over to view the hill lucre. Had we gone over as he desired, and as you were inclined to do, my brother, I suppose we might have been made a similar spectacle for all those who came after us to see." "I'm sorry I was so foolish." Hopeful stared at the pillar. "I wonder why I am not now petrified as Lot's wife. For in what way was there a difference between her sin and mine? She only looked back, while I had a desire to go see the mine. Let grace be adored here, and let me be ashamed that such a thought ever entered my heart. Let us take notice of what we see here, and how we can profit from it in the future." Christian pointed toward the pillar, which was once Lot's wife. "This woman escaped one judgment, for she did not suffer the destruction of Sodom, yet she was destroyed by another, as we see here. She was turned into a pillar of salt." Hopeful nodded. "True, and may she be both a warning and an example to us. A warning that we should shun her sin, and an example of what judgment will overtake anyone who does not heed the warning. In the same way, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, with the 250 men who perished in their sins, we were also an example to others to beware. As he finished speaking all these words, the ground that was under them split open, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up and their households, and all the men who belonged to Korah with their possessions. Numbers 16:31 through 32. But above all, I ponder one particular thing. How is it that Demas and his friends can stand so confidently over there looking for treasure, while this woman did nothing but look behind her? For we do not read that she stepped 1 foot out of the way, and yet she was turned into a pillar of salt. The judgment which overtook her remains as an example to all who see it to this day. And truly, all they have to do is lift up their eyes, and they can't help but see her. Christian looked thoughtful. It is an astonishing thing to contemplate, and it indicates that their hearts have grown desperate in this case. It is fitting to compare them with one who picks pockets in the presence of the judge, or the thief who cuts purse strings under the shadow of the gallows. It is said of the men of Sodom that they were sinners exceedingly, because they were sinners before the Lord, that is, in his sight, and yet he had shown them kindness. For the land of Sodom was like the Garden of Eden. Remember that Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the valley of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the valley and moved his tents as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked exceedingly and sinners against the Lord. Genesis 13:10 through 13. Therefore this provoked him all the more to jealousy, and made their plague as hot as the fire of the Lord out of heaven could make it. It is reasonable to conclude that those who sin in the sight of God, and in spite of such examples being set continually before them to warn them, still do the opposite. People such as this must be judged with the greatest severity. I saw then, with the greatest severity. There's no doubt what you have said is the truth, Hopeful said, but what a mercy it is that neither you, but especially I, he placed his hand on his chest, am not made such an example as this woman. This occasion gives us an opportunity to thank God, to fear before him, and to always remember Lot's wife. When I saw that the two pilgrims went on their way to a pleasant river, which David the king called the river of God, but John called it the river of the water of life. Then he showed me a river of the water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of God and of the Lamb. Revelation 22:1. Their way followed along the bank of this river. Christian and his companion Hopeful walked it with great delight. They also drank of the water of the river, which was pleasant and refreshing to their weary spirits. On the banks of the river, on both sides, stood green trees with all kinds of fruit, and they ate the leaves to prevent gluttony, and which offered other medicinal benefits. On either side of the river, there was also a meadow dotted with lilies and curiously beautiful. It was green all year long. In this meadow they lay down and slept, for in this place they could lie down safely. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. Psalm 23:2. When they awoke, they gathered fruit from the trees and drank of the river of the water, and they drank of the water of the river again, and once again lay down to sleep. They did this for several days and nights. It's good to find rest. Then they sang, "Behold, how these crystal strings do glide to comfort pilgrims by the highway side. The meadows green, besides their fragrant smell, yield dainties for them, and he that can tell what pleasant fruit, yes, leaves these trees do yield, will soon sell all that he may buy this field. Ain't that the truth? So when they were willing to go on, for they weren't as yet at their journey's end, they ate and drank and departed. Now I beheld in my dream that they had not journeyed far when the river divided and began to flow in two different directions. They were sorry to see it, for they dared not go out of the way. Now the way led away from the river and was rough, and their feet grew tender because of their travels. So the souls of the pilgrims became more and more discouraged because of the ruggedness of the way. Then they set out from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the people became impatient because of the journey. Numbers 21:4. Still they went on and wished for a better way. A little ahead of them to the left, the road stretched a little ahead of them to the left of the road stretched a fenced meadow accessed by a stile. That meadow is called Bypath Meadow. Christian said to Hopeful, "If this meadow lies alongside our way, let's cross over into it." So he walked over to the stile to investigate and saw that a pathway on the other side of the fence seemed to run parallel with the way. "It's exactly what I wished for," Christian said as he pointed to the path on the other side of the fence. "Here the going is much easier. Come on, Hopeful, let's cross over." "But," Hopeful said as his mouth screwed to one side, "what if the path should lead us out of the way?" So Christians argued, "That's not likely," Christian said. "Look, doesn't it run alongside our way, but just on the other side of this fence?" So Christian's argument persuaded Hopeful, and he followed him over the stile. Once they had crossed over and were walking on the parallel path, they found it much easier on their feet. Besides that, they spotted a man walking the path ahead of them. His name was Vain Confidence. That's a great name. They called after him and asked him where that way led. He said, "To the Celestial Gate." Christian smiled at Hopeful. "See, didn't I tell you so? With this advice, you can be sure we are going the right direction." So they followed Vain Confidence, who went before them. But once night fell, it grew very dark. In fact, it was so dark they could no longer see the man walking before them. The man himself, Vain Confidence by name, could not see the way before him either, and he fell into a deep pit. The pit was dug in that place purposefully by the prince of those grounds to catch vainglorious fools, so they would be dashed to pieces. And so it happened to Vain Confidence that he fell. He who trusts in his own heart is a fool, but he who walks wisely will be delivered. Proverbs 28:26. Now Christian and Hopeful heard him fall, so they called out to him to figure out what had happened, but there was no answer, only a groaning. Hopeful said, "Where are we now?" Christian was silent, for he was wondering if he had led his friend out of the way. And now it began to rain with thunder and lightning in a most dreadful manner. Water rose and began to flood the path. Hopeful groaned inwardly and said, "Oh, if only I had stayed on the way." Who could have thought that this path would have led us out of the way?" Christian asked. Hopeful said, "From the beginning, I was afraid that this would happen, and so I gave you that gentle warning. I would have spoken a little more directly, but you're older than me in the faith." "Good brother, please don't be offended. I am sorry I brought you out of the way and exposed you to such impending danger. I plead with you, my brother. Forgive me. I did not act with an evil intent." "Be comforted, my brother, for I forgive you. Hopeful answered. And I also believe that this shall work out for our good. Christian said, I'm glad I have a merciful brother traveling with me, but we must not stand here like this. We must try to get back to the right way. How are they going to do it? In that case, Brother Christian, let me lead the way. No, Christian reached out in the dark and placed his hand on Hopeful's arm. If you please, let me go first. Then if we happen to run into any danger, I will encounter it first, since I am the one responsible for leading us out of the way. Wow. That willing to stand between people in danger. That is, way to go, Christian. No, said Hopeful over the sound of the rising water. You shall not go first because your mind is troubled. And for this reason, it may lead you further out of the way. It's not good to lead when your mind's troubled. Then for encouragement, they heard the voice of one saying, let your heart be set toward the highway, even the way that you formerly went. Turn and go back again. Set up for yourself road marks. Place for yourself guideposts. Direct your mind to the highway, the way by which you went. Jeremiah 31:21. But by this time the floodwaters had risen much higher and made the way back very dangerous. Then I understood that it is easier to go out of the way when we are in it than it is to go in when we are out. Yet the two pilgrims made every effort to go back. It was so dark and the flood so high that in their attempt to go back, they could have easily been drowned 9 or 10 times. They could not, with all the skill they had, go back to the stile that night. Therefore, they finally found refuge under a shelter. They sat down there till the break of the day, but being weary, they fell asleep. Not far from the place where they lay, there was a castle called Doubting Castle. The owner of it was Giant Despair, and it was on his grounds they now slept. And so early in the morning, when the giant got up and walked up and down his fields, he caught Christian and Hopeful asleep on his property. With a grim, surly voice, the giant ordered them to wake up, and he asked, where are you from, and what are you doing on my property? The two explained they were pilgrims who had lost their way. Then Giant Despair said, you have trespassed against me by trampling upon and lying on my grounds. Therefore, you must come along with me. So Christian and Hopeful were forced to go with the giant because he was stronger than them. As they walked along, they had very little to say, for they recognized their current circumstances were their fault. And that is where we're going to pause, because what happens next will be for tomorrow. You know, so many times when we wander out of the way, we give the devil a legal right to access our lives, to cause turmoil, to cause problems, and we once again become a prisoner to his way of doing things. I hope y'all are enjoying Pilgrim's Progress. It always challenges me in my walk to, to dig a little deeper, to pay more attention to what's set before me. If you haven't already, join our fellowship. Talk about it. If you have any other books that are just great reads that you would like us to look into, feel free to share those. And, we'd love to see you in church if you don't have a home church. We're a group of people that enjoy doing life together. We're a teaching ministry. We're big on teaching if you watched any of our church services, and we'd love to love you in person because we already love you whether you want to or not, but we'd love to love on you in person. Remember, we love you, God loves you, and there ain't a thing you can do about it.